You're listening to the Paul Young Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode. A lot of you probably don't know, but I wrote these two reflections books. One, the Shack Reflections, and the other one, Crossroads Reflections. And they're not really devotionals. They're just snippets out of each book with a response to it. There's one for every day of the year. And I really like them. And the few who know about it, they also really like them, as far as I've heard. But I'm going to read a couple and we'll see how far we get. But every once in a while, we're going to do a reflections podcast in which I'll do this. So sometimes I have a reflections and I get lost because they lead us down maybe a rabbit hole, maybe a treasure hunt, but I think they're worth the journey. So I'm going to take a look. I opened up the Shack Reflections with no consideration ahead of time. I'm going to do two of them. We'll see how far we get. So it's funny, the first one I just opened up to is sort of a theme phrase in my life. We have this William Paul Young initiative. We call it WIPY. If I'd have kept the M for William, W-M, it would have been called Wimpy, but it's WIPY. It's wippy.org for William Paul Young Initiative. So WPYI. And if you want to go see stuff that we're working on, hopefully the website is up and functioning and you can go there. So here's the phrase and a response to it. The phrase from the book is a statement that Papa makes, and it's, life takes a bit of time and a lot of relationship. And my response to that is, I am such a half-hearted creature, pretending I actually know something about life and acting as though I know how to get there. I am slowly, painfully learning to trust that you do and that you are for me. Well, the issue of trust is a big deal. And that phrase, it takes a bit of time and a lot of relationship, is so true in my life. In comparison, and you'd look back and you'd look at my life and you'd say, it's taken a lot of time. But in comparison to the depth of relationship that has been required, the time is kind of insignificant. Yes, it's taken a lot of time, no doubt about it. But in comparison to the necessity of relationship for my healing, time has not been the real factor. A lot of times we look at our process and we think, oh man, this is taking so long. But part of the reason that it takes long for many of us, including me, maybe especially me, is that I was resistant to allowing relationships to enter my life. I fought them off. I didn't want to be embarrassed. And I didn't want to see the look of disgust on another person's face if I let them into my inside world. And so I resisted relationship. And therefore I resisted the necessity of relationships for my own healing. And it took a bit of time for me to learn that it was absolutely essential that I let people into my inside world. I am so grateful for the relationships that I've experienced. I let them in slow. I didn't open the door wide and say, come on in, see the mess that I am. It was usually because of desperation that I let people into my inside world. And a lot of that is related to trust, like it says here. It says, I am slowly, painfully learning to trust that you do, that God does, and that you, God, are for me. You know, you grow up and you're betrayed, you go through trauma, you get bullied, you get abandoned. You know, some of you entered the world and no father, no mother. And you were put in something like foster care and you've tried to find your way. Well, it's hard to trust when you've been betrayed and bullied and abandoned. And there are a lot of other things that many of us have experienced, abuse and such. Trust becomes a very tentative thing. And when we put it out there, we are quickly ready to pull it back. Let me tell you, you will not come to healing apart from relationship. And not just a relationship with God, but a relationship with human beings. We need people with skin on who will look us in the face and say, I see you. I was on this trip up to Whitefish. I think it's Whitefish up in Montana. And my friend Scott and I were driving. And he is the first man who ever said to me, Paul, I don't care how badly you screw things up, I'm not leaving. Nobody had said that to me. You know, I went to boarding school, was sent to boarding school when I was 6 years old. I'd already been disconnected from my parents. We came back to a different culture that I didn't know how to navigate in Canada. So, you know, we were always moving from one situation to another, and there was no sense of being grounded anywhere. And so for a man to say to me, I don't care how badly you mess up, I'm not leaving, that was huge for me. And I look back on it. In fact, that's why I dedicated one of the books that I wrote to Scott and to my brother Tim. So relationship, a lot of relationship. And I know for many of us, that's a hard road. And here's the crazy thing. A lot of times we will just place our trust, actually misplace our trust in someone we don't even know. And we don't even know if they do see us. It's just a sort of desperate, knee-jerk response to the emptiness in our own souls. But when we take the risk with someone that we're getting to know, to trust, and this is true about our relationship with God, it is slow, it is a process, it is often very tentative. We sometimes extend it and quickly pull it back. And we test people. We want to see if they're trustworthy. We push the boundaries. We say things that are not kind. There's so many things that we do around the issue of trust, both helpful and not helpful. And I want to tell you that we are not going to come to healing apart from this issue of trusting other human beings. You will not come to wholeness in isolation. It's not possible. We are created as communal beings. And part of that is that we are created in the image of God, and God has never been alone. God has always been in relationship. So, moving on. Here's the next one, which is right across the page from the one I just read. And it's totally connected to what we were just talking about. Don't ever think that what my son chose to do didn't cost us dearly. Love always leaves a significant mark, Papa stated softly and gently. We were there together, there being at the cross. And the response, today I celebrate that there is a together in you, one God, yet three persons. I celebrate the other-centered, self-giving fellowship and love that constitutes your very eternal essence, and that nothing can break your togetherness. If nothing can break God's togetherness inside the relationship of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, that gives me hope that nothing can break my inclusion in that. You know, that's a hard thing, this idea that there was no separation, that there has been no separation in the relationship of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But it's absolutely important. My clan, my people, whom I love, my people presented the idea that at the cross there was separation, that the Father turned his face away. There's this passage, I think it's in Hosea, that there's a half a verse that we would quote. And that half a verse it says something to the effect, you are so beautiful, you are so magnificent, you are so holy that you can't look on sin. See, we love that half a verse. You know, we're good at half verses like that. You know what the other half says? So why do you? You are so good, you are so holy, you are so magnificent. You can't look on sin. So why do you? It's completely saying you do. And if you think about it, if Jesus is God in the flesh, Jesus spends a lot of time looking on sin. He's totally surrounded by it. All this brokenness on the planet. Or do we have two gods here? Do we have God the Father and over here we have God the Son? Do we have two gods? One that can look on sin and one that can't? Of course not. There is no time that God the Father and the Spirit were not in union with Jesus. And on the cross, what happens? Psalm 23 starts with, my God, why have you forsaken me? And Christ cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me? I think that's part of what is going on in the Garden of Gethsemane. Is there any way for this cup to pass from me? Because Jesus is going to plummet the depths of what we experience and what we think is true and what we feel, and that is we've been abandoned by God. Our cry is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Halfway through the psalm it says, but you do not despise the affliction of the afflicted, and when he cries out, you will hear him. And at the end it says, and he finished it. Jesus takes into himself all this brokenness that the human race has experienced. This crushed him. But he felt our feeling, and he cried our cry. Where are you? Where are you? My God, why have you forsaken me? And Jesus does not do what Adam did, which was to turn his face away, to alienate himself, to believe that he was separated. He was never separated. He alienated himself, but that's not separation. He turned his face away, but that's not separation. In his mind, it was he who separated himself. And in the midst of our losses, we must keep our face turned toward the one who loves us, regardless of how we feel. In the depths of those times where we feel that God is nowhere to be found, we must enter into the experience of Jesus, who refused to turn his face away. I can't feel you, I can't sense you, but I know you love me. It feels like you've abandoned me. It feels like you're gone. Look at this situation that I'm in the midst of. But I will turn my face to you, and I will keep my eyes to you. The verse, I will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind, heart is stayed on me. When we feel most abandoned, it is most important to turn our face to the one who loves us. Blessings on you in the midst of whatever situation you find yourself today. Much love. Thank you for listening. If you would like to connect with us with inquiries, comments, suggestions, stories, and more, please go to paulyoungpodcast.com. There you're going to find resources and any notes related to any particular podcast. Today, participate with love, do the next right thing, and trust the ripples.